Today we're going to learn how to install the press-to-open accessory. We're installing the assembly in an integrated column with an internal dispenser. Our first step is to remove the plastic header and screw from the side mounting bracket. Then we'll remove the screw that holds the header bracket to the cabinet, but don't discard the screw. After that, we need to partially install the bracket screw we removed in the previous step and partially remove the other two screws. Our next step is to mount the drive-in sensor unit assembly, but we need to remove the plastic wire routing clip located behind the wiring diagram. This will allow us to mount the drive-in sensor unit assembly under the electrical and water lines. We just slide the bracket under the screws and then tighten them. You'll only need that third screw for an internal dispenser unit. Then, we have to cut off a small tab that protrudes from the top plastic trim on top of the door. This will make room for the new panel mounting bracket that will go on the unit later. We're going to use an oscillating tool, but you can use a hacksaw or a utility knife. Now we have to remove the door positioning device on the top of the door by removing the two screws. Keep those screws. You'll reuse those when you attach the next bracket. At this point, we have to install the bracket to the top of the door using the two screws from the door positioner device. We'll add a third screw to prevent the bracket from moving. There isn't a hole in the plastic trim, but there is a hole in the metal door. We're using a cordless drill to drive the screw in, but you could pre-drill that hole with a screw at the edge of the bracket. Up next, remove all the screws from the door panel mounting bracket that was shipped with the unit and remove it. When you're done, you'll replace it with a new one. Next, we have to secure the bottom of the panel mounting bracket using a flathead screw and bearing. The brass bushing in the flathead screw inserted in the bottom allows this bracket to pivot. You'll find a shim provided in the kit. Place it between the door and the door panel bracket and secure it with a screw removed from the previous step. The shim is spacing the bracket away from the door, so when the panel is mounted, there'll be space for the bracket-thin panel to move freely at the top. This is a key feature of the sensing system and allows the panel to move. The sensor picks up the movement to activate the door opener device. At this point, the press-to-open system is installed, but it's not connected electrically. You'll find a 10-foot long cable that has a small connector. The other end will be plugged into the power supply. All you have to do is connect the cable to the power supply. Now that it's plugged in, we can test the function of the unit. Just press on the bracket to give it some movement. The motor will open the door, and in 4 seconds, it automatically retracts. At this point, we'll mount the door panel. We mount it the same way we do other Sub-Zero refrigerators. You can use the template for establishing the initial mounting holes at the top. Because this installation is not in an enclosure, we won't be adjusting the panel. If needed, there is height adjustment and an in and out bracket adjustment. The two large nuts on the bottom will allow the bracket and panel to move in both directions. With that done, you can remove the spacer and the helper screw at the top. Always check to see if the panel can move freely at the top of the door. This is crucial for the proper operation of the assembly. You want it to spring back. The panel can be adjusted at the top of the door by loosening these 4 screws. All we have to do now is close the door and see if it operates. After 4 seconds, the door will close on its own. You can see the piston extend and retract after 4 seconds. Now we're ready to put the proper header in. This is a header for a non-internal dispenser. The U-shaped header is for an internal dispenser. We need to trace the hole, then we'll cut it out. Then take the header and put it in place on top. There's a tab that slips in the slot on the left and another tab that inserts into the front. Next, we'll put the covers on the sides of the door. They're held on by magnets and positioned at the top and bottom of the door bracket. We're almost done. One last thing to remember is to make sure the position of this drive and sensor unit assembly is adjusted correctly, because it controls the positioning of the door. Look to see if the third button, or the one closest to the center of the unit, is making contact with this bracket. If it is too far in, the sensor will not pick up the movement of the door and will not function. To adjust, loosen the 3 nuts on this assembly inward or outward. With the door in the correct position, it should operate properly. And that's how to install the press-to-open accessory.